I'm proud of my military service. On a few occasions, out of hundreds, when I commented on it, I described it inaccurately, and I regret it. I take full responsibility for it. It was not intentional, but that is no excuse.
Connecticut Senate candidate Dick Blumenthal in a debate last night that we are contractually obligated to call a smackdown.
And he is still talking about that misstatement about his Vietnam record with 4 weeks to go and a really tough race up there in Connecticut. Top Line starts right now.
Hello and welcome to ABC's Top Line. I'm Rick Klein.
I'm Karen Travers.
Every day at noon Eastern, we're right here bringing you the latest in politics, everything you need to know. It's twitter.com/Rick Klein, twitter.com/Karen Travers, Ms. Travers. Lots of debates last night, lots of action. We got a new poll. Tell us about it.
New poll. Let's start off with closing the gap. Rick, if you want to describe where the Democrats were going into this campaign, you could say the Category 5 hurricane. Now we're downgrading it to maybe a Category 4. Things are improving a little bit. Take a look at this poll from ABC News, Washington Post that we just came out with today. A generic ballot. Right now, Republicans are leading 49 to 43. Last month, that was a 13-point gap. 53 to 40. Democrats, of course, are saying this is a sign of optimism. Don't get too excited just yet, though.
Well, yeah, closing the gap, but not altogether close. It's still unusual to have Republicans leading in this measure. No one, of course, votes on the generic ballot, but it is critical. And it does say that Democrats are coming home. Will they come home in the numbers they need and the places they need is the other question. Next up, it's the Salem strategy. Christine O'Donnell is up with a new ad, and she wants you to know something very important about her background. Take a look.
I'm not a witch. I'm nothing you've heard. I'm you. I'll go to Washington and do what you do. I'm Christine O'Donnell, and I approve this message. I'm you.
I am you. I'm not a witch. These are things that I don't think have ever been said before, probably going back to the 17th century, I've got to say.
That first attack ad back during the Salem witch trials, of course. And it's just fascinating that she's coming out with this sort of softer ad, though I thought it was funny that you see all these people saying, oh, she's in black, the background is black. Or maybe it's reinforcing the fact that she really is.
It's Halloween almost.
Tepid Tea Party. In that ABC News Washington Post poll that just came out, registered voters, looking back in July, 30% said that they would be more likely to support a Tea Party candidate. Now, that is just 18%. Is this a sign that support for the Tea Party might be weakening, or perhaps we're getting closer to a general election? That was during primary season when you really had those battles in the Republican Party between the Tea Party candidate, maybe a more mainstream candidate. Whether or not that's going to influence the general election, I think that's going to be something to watch.
Certainly, the Tea Party has had some negative headlines over the last couple of months, and people have got to learn a little bit more about what it is. Some of the candidates they put up have had their own gaps and their own issues. Christine O'Donnell, of course, number one. But no question about it, Tea Party energy will be good for Republicans. I think everyone can agree on that. And finally today, something else that's good for Republicans, Big Buy, American Crossroads, that Karl Rove and Ed Gillespie-backed group, is dumping some $4.2 million more into 8 Senate races across the country, establishing itself as the single biggest force in outside groups, maybe even inside groups right now. Democrats don't have anything that's even close to the scale of what is going on in all of these critical states.
This is remarkable when you consider how much money the Democrats raised for the Barack Obama's campaign in 2008. And I think the questions are going to be, did they just get lazy? Did they think that they were going to have this advantage and that the Republicans or the right wasn't going to be able to gather together and get this much coordinated effort and this much money? But I think this is something that could carry over into 2012 too. Democrats are going to need to figure out a way to counter this money.
That's exactly right. Well, we begin today's program up in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, where we're joined by Sean Bilat, who's the Republican candidate for the 4th Congressional District, now represented, of course, by Barney Frank. And Mr. Bilat, thank you for being here. I want to start with a broad overview of this race. You used to be a Democrat. You live in Brookline, Massachusetts, one of the more liberal parts of the country. How can a Republican possibly be successful against Barney Frank?
Well, Scott Brown won here in the 4th District. I think that's important to note. And around Massachusetts, there are a lot of people who I think are like me. They grew up Democrats. They never really questioned it. And now they're starting to look at where the country is, what their party's doing, and they're starting to think, how can we get different leadership? How can we get new leadership? And that's what I'm offering. That's what the Republican Party is offering. And that's why I think we're going to do well in November.
Well, looking at that race from January when Scott Brown did pull off that win in Massachusetts, he talked about how he'd be willing to work with Democrats, how he would be bipartisan, work with the White House. If you're trying to use that as your example of why you could win in such a Democratic district, what would you be willing to work with the Obama administration on and maybe reach some sort of bipartisan accord?
I'll work with anybody who has good policy ideas. If they're focused on reducing the deficit, if they're focused on getting the economy back on track, if they're focused on a strong national defense, I'll work with anybody who's like that.
But is there something specific? Is there something specific that the Obama administration has put forward that you can say, yes, I agree with that, I'd be willing to sign on?
Well, there are some interesting ideas out there, not necessarily coming from the administration, but on tax reform. The idea of reducing the number of tax brackets, flattening the code, and doing a couple of other things that would reduce the number of loopholes and really drive growth.
On taxes, you have some interesting things on your website about it that I was looking at, and I want to ask specifically, you mentioned the idea of a fair tax, a national sales tax. Is that a good idea? Should we see that clear away all the other taxes and say this is what we're going to do?
Well, actually, that may be on my website as an alternate. I'm actually in favor of the flat tax. I think that we can exempt income below the poverty level to protect people, the working poor, to protect everybody. I'm advocating that no one would pay taxes, income tax below the poverty level, but above that, a flat tax. And the reason for that is the current tax code provides disincentives to incremental investment and hard work, and we don't want to do that. We want a code that's simple, effective, fair, and doesn't discourage people from succeeding.
I want to ask you specifically about something that Republicans put forward a couple weeks ago, their pledge to America. You were quoted afterward as saying it didn't go far enough, specifically around some areas of entitlement reform. What should Republicans commit to doing when you talk about Social Security, you talk about Medicare, these huge portions of the budget that we know are just spinning out of control? That's
right. They are spinning out of control. They're tough issues to take on politically because there are no good answers from a political standpoint. They're good policy outcomes.
So take them on. Tell us what should happen.
Well, I think for Social Security, we need to raise the cap on taxable income for payroll taxes. I think we need to raise the retirement age, and there's a lot of fear-mongering about that. I'm not talking about people who are about to retire. I'm not talking about people who are already retired. But if you look at my generation, if you look at people born after 1970, we can expect, at best, under ideal conditions, only 3/4 of the benefit despite paying our whole working lives. So clearly reform's in order. In addition, I think we need to emphasize these private savings accounts. Once again, there's fear-mongering on this, the idea that, oh, we're going to privatize Social Security and nobody will have this safety net. That's not what we're talking about. We need to get realistic about solutions that are sustainable and that will shore up the program long-term while eliminating the drag on the economy and the addition to the debt that we're seeing.
You might have heard us talking earlier about the Tea Party enthusiasm, and in a district that is as Democratic-leaning as your district, could the Tea Party help you? Could that be a good thing, and could that drive some turnout?
Well, I can't speak for the Tea Party nationally, but around here, the Tea Party is a group of citizen activists. They're interested in a lot of the same things that I'm talking about. And a lot of the people who go to the Tea Party meetings also come in and dial phones and do all the other things that we need to win this campaign. So in that respect, the Tea Party is hugely important. But from the perspective of identifying myself as a Tea Party candidate or something like that, it's not really as relevant. So I hear a lot of people asking about that. I hear a lot of talk in the press about that. But to me, it's a group of citizen activists. Citizen activists are a good thing, and that's just what it is.
I want to ask you about the issue of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. You come from a perspective as a member of the Marines, as a major in the Marines. Obviously, you're a big proponent of repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell. You've said that you think the policy works. I want to ask you, what would the problem be in your mind as someone who serves in the military of having members of the military who are openly gay and lesbian serving?
Well, right now there are gays and lesbians serving,
but not openly. The difference obviously is whether they be openly serving. How would that change the military in a way that you think would be detrimental?
Well, I guess I don't know what you mean by openly, because if I'm aware and other Marines are aware that a Marine is gay or lesbian, it to me seems open. I mean, what the current policy prohibits isn't orientation. And so the real question is the burden of proof needs to be on the people who want to make the change. Any other change that we make in the military, I'll give you an example. When I was on active duty, under our camouflage utilities, we wore brown skivvy shirts. we changed to green after a year of study. So everything that the military looks at changing, they study for a long time. And here we have this policy that's going to have massive impacts on the administration and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And it's been thrust upon the military by civilian leadership. And then post facto, they said, oh, yeah, you can study it. I'm saying we should be sure that it doesn't diminish capability, adds value, and makes our fighting force more effective.
Would it diminish capability?
I don't know. That's the sort of thing we need to study. If the DOD is on board, I'm on board.
Okay. Sean Bilat was running for Congress up in Massachusetts trying to take on Barney Frank. It's going to be a great race to watch in the next month. Good luck to your campaign, and thanks for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.